Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. I'm Dave Turner, along with Pat Pickens, and number 30 into the Raptors at Prudential Center as Martin Brodeur's number is retired after a stellar, unbelievable career. Pat, the first thing, I know you were there. You got to speak to Marty and all that after the game and after the media availability there. Pat, just looking back at his career. Now that it's done and the numbers there, and certainly Toronto for the Hall of Fame is coming up next, where is his rightful place in the history of the game right now?
It's interesting because we watched him very closely for a long period of time, and he's up there in terms of the greatest of that ever played the position. Obviously, you listen to him talk, and he says, I'm just a goalie, a guy who loved to play hockey from Montreal. And you think about his some of the great players he watched, as his father was the photographer of the Montreal Canadiens all those years, and he got to spend time with some of those great players, through the decades, and the Drydens and even the Patrick Roys and even some of those guys. It's just, and then to hear him, I can only imagine what it would be like to have somebody who had that much experience around such an organization like Montreal, now be perceived as the greatest of all time. There are some, I'm always bad at, figuring out who the best ever is. Like Brodeur's numbers, there are numbers that of his that will not be broken. Like, his wins record will be in jeopardy at some point just because.
This year it could be. Or the wins of the season could be this year.
Right, the wins of the season, yeah. And then his career wins will probably, because, Marty grew up, or he came up in a time when ties were such.
And lost some years to the lockout, too. So
yeah, a couple of lockout year, or a lockout, a year and a half really to a lockout. And then, the shootout instead of ties, the first 11 seasons of his career, he was ties. He lost wins because of that. I guess it would, now 2 lockouts he would have, or 2.5, a full season and 2 half seasons in terms of lockouts. So there's a lot of games and losses or wins that he lost there. But I imagine someone will break the 691 at some point. But the wins in the season, pretty remarkable. Actually, listening to Barry Trotz talk about it last weekend, when the Capitals were in New Jersey, and he would not, allude to whether or not he would put Holtby in the opportunity to break the wins record. Kind of more that canned line. Well, we're just focused on today type deal, and then we're focused on tomorrow. But you get the vibe that there's going to be a good chance for Holtby to break that record, just because they're at 40 wins through 53 games only, and he plays, basically every night. There's a lot of records that he's got that are not going to go. And the shutouts, the minutes. It's just he was a remarkable player in that he played in an era when, if you look at the Jennings trophies, for instance, which are given to the goaltender or goaltenders who, have the best save percentage. I'm sorry, the fewest goals against. And you look at some of the winners who won it amid Brodeur's tenure, and, it's usually a tandem because guys are playing, 50 games or 40 some odd games and splitting it. There was a year when the Flyers had it, and Robert Ashe and Roman Cechmanek shared it. But, Marty's name's on all the Jennings trophies. It's not, he doesn't share any of them. And then you look at, the year he played 78 games and won the Vezina trophy. That's pretty incredible when you look at it. He gave up 4 games of his career, or 4 games of a season, and was still deemed the best goaltender in that season. You look at Holtby. Holtby could conceivably win the Vezina this year. I don't think he's going to play 78 games doing it. It's just his tenure was so remarkable, and you can make the case that Patrick Roy revolutionized the position, and Dominik Hasek was perhaps the greatest ever in terms of, stopping pucks and, acrobatic saves. But Marty's consistency was the big thing. And for so long, he was so unheralded just because the perception of that system goalie, how he had Niedermayer and Stevens and Danico and some of those guys in front of him. And then those guys all left, and then he started getting the recognition from around the league as, oh, hey, this guy's actually very good, more than just a product of a good system.
Yeah, it is interesting how maybe the thought around the league was that he was just a cog in the system.
Yeah.
and winning those 2 Vezinas later on, I really do think validated him. To me, I look at his career and I say that he was someone who had a style that was so unique to himself, not only with the double stack save or the way that he would play certain pucks or that he'd be able to kick out rebounds differently because he wasn't in the butterfly, and the fact that, look, there's a rule that was changed, generally speaking, because of him, and the way that he was able to play the puck as a third defenseman out there. Which, I think today it would have been interesting to see him on an offensive team in today's world without that, just to see what he would do in terms of breakout passes. Because, of course, the 2-line pass was also not allowed for a lot of that stretch. So that's something even to think about even more. But, I do think, if I had to really discuss it, I always think that Dominik Hasek, to be quite honest, in terms of just ability to flat out stop a puck if it mattered, was better.
Yeah.
And I think that he played on much lesser teams than Waugh and Brodeur. But I think Brodeur's longevity, what he was able to do to handle the puck, and just how many games he was able to play, I think those things set him apart. Sure, he was an excellent puck stopper, but to me, it's all the other things that he did that really set him apart from just being a guy who was stopping pucks in net.
Still very, very well deserved, just because, although we both agree that it was a little unique that Lou Lamoriello decided to make a trade the day of that Brodeur. We'll get to that in a minute, but yeah, it was a little unique to see those guys representing other organizations there for Marty Knight. I said it was kind of like a band getting back together for one night, and then they go their separate ways. But well deserved for Marty, and then so good job and the ceremony was fantastic. If you got to see it, it was as good as you could do. The Devils did a good job in honoring perhaps their greatest player of all time.
Absolutely. It was a really spectacular night. But speaking of things that are not as spectacular, just because...
And goalies from Montreal, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I know you and I are both going to... I want to see Carey Price in net because he's incredible. And the fact is he is going to be shut down for the season, which I don't think it's a surprise because I think the minute that you saw him struggling still, even at this point, to really get back to 100%, I think that if you want to have another crack with him in the future, him getting injured again this year, if he came back, was a bad thing. I think it's smart to let him get healed up. Probably not play in the World Cup now. I think they'd be crazy to let him play in the World Cup. Unless they feel that at that point, getting him more work going into the season makes sense, but I don't know if I'd go that way. Carey Price out for the year now. Montreal on a free fall, but then all of a sudden we're hearing all these rumors that they want to sign guys, and to me, those moves kind of don't make sense. I think for Price, though, Pat, I think you'll agree, I think this is the right thing to shut him down, just because clearly something was not right with that knee.
Yeah, you look at him trying, laboring last week. We saw the footage of it, and it looked bad. And then you see him in goal again, and La Presse is reporting that they're going to shut him down. You said with an MCL injury, probably a torn MCL, based on the time missed. You wonder, and I would not say this is his fault, but you wonder if they're going to work on a way for him to maybe leave himself less exposed to injury. Just because 2 years ago their season was sunk in the Eastern Conference Final because Chris Kreider skated into him and he was knocked out, and now this season's going to be sunk because of another injury, and it's just last year he was so good, and he was the MVP of the league, and he willed that team there. But it's weird how this is just another year of disappointment. It's going to be in Montreal, where they're probably not even going to make the playoffs this season, and they're, like you said, they're in free fall. And Ben Scrivens has been good lately, but the same with the Mike Condon thing. How much can you actually expect out of Ben Scrivens here? And obviously, the irony with that being, they had Devin Dubnyk in their system 2 seasons ago as one of the Black Aces, and now he can't win a game either in Minnesota. But we'll get to more of that in a minute. But Montreal kind of a little pushback here, 3 wins in a row after their free fall, and a game against Buffalo, maybe they can get back into it here. But it's not looking good for them based on the fact they have played more games than most everybody else. Pittsburgh is ahead of them with 2 games in hand as of the recording, and Tampa has 2 games in hand also. Without Carey Price, without they had been a little lax and loose defensively, which and we all thought that I don't know about you, Dave, but I know the perception was building that Mike Therrien was just going to get fired.
I think he still might. I mean,
yeah, for sure. But something is amiss here, and we kind of went on it last week. We obviously talked about it last week about the fact that Therrien was in trouble, but Dave, they're you can't have a. I mean, it's almost like Carey Price. If you want to, we talked about Dominik Hasek. It's almost like that at this point, where Montreal just relies on him the way Buffalo used to rely on Hasek.
Yeah, it's very similar actually.
And Price, obviously different style, but no less the great puck stopper. But something is amiss here, where Montreal's got to figure out how to win, no matter who's in goal, as opposed to being so reliant on Price. Still, you want to watch the greatest players in the sport play, and if Carey's not going to play, if Carey's out for the year, that's going to be a big disappointment, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting looking at this team now, and what obviously the pressure in Montreal is always immense, especially when they do, unlike Toronto where they are this year. Certainly, Montreal believes that they were a contender this year coming into the season, especially with Price. I think if you're Marc Bergevin, you have to be very careful now about. Look, he's going to be on the hot seat eventually too.
Yeah.
If this doesn't work, and I think that if you go into the offseason and you miss the playoffs. And you can basically say, well, we didn't have our goaltender all year, so that's why we didn't do it. Okay, I think that will certainly give him some time to maybe make the moves in the offseason and restructure this roster. But if you go for it right now and you bring in an Eric Stahl or who knows who else, and you try to win now, and it doesn't happen, I think you kind of put yourself into a corner a little bit where you kind of made your bed with saying, well, I think our team's good enough, so let me go grab someone, or let me even go grab a goalie or something like that.
Well, they already did that with Scrivens, but
or who knows if something else, maybe they grab Reimer for all we know. I think for them, the worst thing they could do right now, I think, is believe that they're still a contender, because I don't think that they are. There's too many teams that are ahead of them. Look, are they going to turn it around? They've given no evidence as to why they're going to, by the way they've played lately. And maybe their fast start was just really, really overachieving anyway, and maybe this team is – over a course of 150 games or something like that, if you average them out, in a hypothetical situation, really not that good. I don't know. I think certainly there's talent there. There's a lot of talent in certain spots there, but clearly something is wrong. And I think the worst thing they could do right now is be short-sighted and make a move with the hopes of making the playoffs. Because you look at the standings. I mean, the Devils are ahead of them. Philadelphia, by this time, if you're listening to this, maybe Saturday or Sunday, Philadelphia could be past them by then. Ottawa has a 2-point. They're 2 points back. They do have one more game played, but I don't know. I think Montreal is much closer to an Austin Matthews situation where they could maybe sneak in somewhere close to getting him, as opposed to making the playoffs.
This team's got serious defensive deficiencies too, and they kind of need to address that. This is an aging defense, and I agree with you, Dave, that you can't really they're kind of stuck in between right now, and they're in a position where if they try to go for it and don't make it, then that could really hamper them long term. Especially like if you just consider this the lost year. You know, I know that people are desperate for it up there, but at the same time, you know, you can't. If you have a plan, you have to stick to it. And you know, Montreal's got a tough thing going on there because you know they were so close 2 years ago, and they were so good. They were in such a good spot last year, and now if they fell out of the playoffs entirely, man, there could be some big changes. But speaking of sticking to a plan, Dave, we alluded to the great front office man from New Jersey, Lou Lamoriello, and we alluded to the deal he made. And man, what a trade it was for Toronto when they offloaded $7 million in cap space and their number one defenseman, Dion Phaneuf, who, you know, let's face it, had a tumultuous at best history in Toronto. If you recall the infamous look from April Reimer to Alicia Cuthbert, the famous girlfriend of Dion Phaneuf, and that was kind of where the Phaneuf Leafs thing peaked. But they finally traded, and Dave, they traded him to Ottawa, which provincial rivals. And the perception is, and you can't disagree with this, really, that the Leafs embraced tanking, but also, you know, killed the deal with some of the deals they were able to offload and some of the expiring contracts. Dave, what are your thoughts on maybe the Phaneuf marriage or the Phaneuf tenure in Toronto, and now the messy divorce?
I don't think you want me to talk about his actual marriage. I'm not going to go there. No. You know, I think this is a situation where Toronto is lucky that someone's stupid enough to do it. And I'm sorry, Ottawa, but I'll stick with Toronto first. So for them, clearly it wasn't working. He was a guy who came in, and look, there were people when he was in Calgary early on in his career that were comparing him to the next Scott Stevens, but he had offensive skill on top of it, where he was big, he could hit, he had a shot. And all of a sudden, it never happened. And he goes to Toronto, and look, I get it. The team isn't very good, and they weren't very good for any of the years that he was there, minus before the
lockout year.
Yeah, a few years ago. But that being said, I think the pressure really got to him. I think he was a guy who, when he got the C, and he was the guy who everyone was looking to is, Dion, you're the leader of this team. Why are we not making the playoffs? I don't think he can handle that. And who knows, maybe he'll go and, you know, with time, he'll start to play better in Ottawa. But the fact is, right now, he's a second pairing guy that makes $7 million. He doesn't do anything spectacularly well anymore. And for the Leafs, they had to move on. I mean, if you're going to make a clean break and start to bring these new guys up, I think having him around is a bad thing. Just because you're trying to find the new leadership, you're trying to have some of these young forwards that are with the Marlies right now that are probably going to be up here next year. You want to have them be the leaders, and I think with him there, he was kind of blocking that. So for the Leafs, it's a slam dunk. They got rid of a headache. They got rid of a lot of money. That, sure, you know, we say the Leafs have a lot of money to spend, but they do have the cap to deal with. So for years forward, it's going to help them because there's still 5 years left on the deal. As for Ottawa, I mean, I'm sure you'll agree with me. I know they got a couple of decent prospects in it, but they did also give up their second rounder in 2017. I don't get this move for Ottawa just because, sure, he's a decent second pairing guy, but considering they're going to have guys to pay and they're also probably going to want to add to this team because, look, they're not a playoff team right now. This is not a move that's going to help them have cap room, that's for sure.
No, I think the thing with the perception of the trade with Ottawa is, I mean, they have a lot of cap room. To be fair. But it's a signal to your face that we're trying to make this work defensively, and they're a team that is defensively. You know, talk about Montreal's deficiencies. Ottawa is worst in the entire sport in goals against. So they needed to do something defensively, and they're still in it here technically in terms of the playoffs. You know, they're still kind of hanging around. They've lost 7 of 10, not getting points in that stretch. But I think that the thought is that they could get a guy like Phaneuf. He could be a second pair guy. He shores up that second pair maybe, and the heat is off him because it's mostly on Erik Karlsson, and maybe they'll take some of the heat off of Karlsson with Phaneuf there. But I read an interesting thing. I forget who did it. One of the analytics guys did it. That they did a great job of shielding Phaneuf this year, strictly to move him, because his advanced metrics look pretty good this year. But he was not playing against the top players while he was in Toronto. And I think that's one of the things that, kind of made him look alluring, that he was having this pretty good season, that he was not giving up the high volume scoring chances. I agree, Dave, that just you look at what the Leafs got out of this trade is cap space. And you look at Nazem Kadri's restricted at the end of this year. And you look at, all the expiring contracts, and you know what they're going for this season. You know what they're doing. To free up the cap space where they win the lottery and then they get Stamkos also. I mean, and Sportsnet is actually even talking about it already up there. That if they can add Stamkos and Austin Matthews. So let's face it, the Leafs aren't going anywhere this year. They clearly are not. They clearly were never going to go anywhere this year. Babcock just wanted a system in place, and good on them for making these deals. They think about the cap, like the horrible contracts they've killed. They've got rid of Clarkson, and they buried Horton's money, which they can afford to do. They got rid of Kessel, which whatever you want to say about Kessel. For the American kid in Toronto, there was always that disconnect there. And now they've offloaded Phaneuf's money. And, they have they sort of have a base with, Bozak's having a pretty good year. And Kadri, they're going to sign. And maybe they have to pony up and give some money to Reimer. But, they're going to have money to spend this offseason. And there's one guy who everybody knows has kind of this strange, unique kind of relationship with Toronto, whether it's the the favoriting tweets or he's obviously from Ontario. So you got to think that this is going to be that's what they're putting all their eggs in the Stamkos basket there.
Yeah, it's funny, though. Looking at in terms of Lou Lamoriello, though, I almost feel like his job this year has been to clean the bloodstains off of a murder scene, the walls of a murder scene. I mean, that's how bad it was. And he's reversed a lot of that. He's gotten rid of all the baggage. We knew this team was not going to compete this year. But what they've done is they've shed all of the dead weight so that they can move forward next year. And I'm not even talking about just the Stamkos, which I'm not even convinced he's still going to go there.
Right.
But just the idea of having money and having flexibility to really starting the rebuild now, because in a sense they still had to kind of get rid of things this year, and this is like I want to call this year zero in a sense, which I guess that doesn't make much sense, but but I feel like next year is the first really fresh year where they can kind of just forge ahead with hopefully some new really good talent along the way. I think they're moving on the right direction for sure. But speaking of someone who is moving in the very right direction, I can't believe the amount of points he's scoring on a nightly basis. He had 4 on Thursday night.
Five on Thursday night.
I must not have looked again. Okay, so he had 5 points on Thursday night, which is absolutely mind-boggling. But then again, that's what he's done every minute since he's been in the NHL when he's playing. Connor McDavid, Pat, I know you got to speak to him. You wrote an excellent piece on him the other day. Can you even put him into words at this point?
No, really. What basically I would say in terms of McDavid is you realize why teams were tanking for him last year. You realize why Buffalo did what it did. You realize why Arizona was, maybe not Arizona less so, but and now you look at what the Leafs are trying to do to get Austin Matthews, and you start to see it because you want to talk about year zero in terms of the Leafs. This is almost how it's played out for the Oilers too here because just because I don't know about you, Dave, but you see what this kid is capable of, and you think about what we missed with this injury here with him, and he's doing it against really, really bad teams, to be fair. So I mean, he did it. He had 3 points against Columbus. He had 2 points in Ottawa, and then 5 points against a Leafs team that was basically a junior team or an American Hockey League team. But you look at the skill. I mean, Dave, we saw it firsthand Tuesday watching him up close. That the defensive skill that this kid has, where he can pick your pocket. He picked Andy Green's pocket Tuesday night. He picked Seth Jones's pocket the first night back, and he ended up with a breakaway and a scoring chance. Where this, every time he's on the ice, you almost have to watch him, and the injury was really disappointing now in hindsight, especially when you see what he's capable of. But Dave, this guy, he lost 37 games to the broken collarbone, and Dave, he's going to get to 20 goals this year. He's at 9 now. He's probably going to get to 20 goals. He might get to 50 points still. He's got 24 points in 19 games since coming back from, as of this recording, since coming back from injury. Dave, he has 24 points since he came in his career, and he has 12 in 6 games since coming back. Dave, he came back 10 days ago, and the guy's got 12 points.
Would you have ever thought that he was out for that long? Because the answer is unequivocally no.
No, but you look at I did some research and I was looking through it, and you look at the first year that Sid had when he was in the league, and so much pressure and so much heat on him, and so much placed on him as straight out of the lockout, face of the league type situation where he was healthy the whole season, had a 102-point season on an atrocious Penguins team. And then the next year he had 120 points. And Dave, these are the kind of numbers that McDavid's gonna put up here. He's as before he had the 5 points last night, he was 5th in the league in points per game. So it's crazy to me that to watch. And remember too that he's 19 years old is the main thing. And you talk to him, and he's a little guarded, and he's a little bit, he was very, quiet and meek a little bit, but his play is not by any stretch. No. And now, by the way, he's 2nd in the league in points per game. He's averaging more than 1.25 per game here, 1.26, and he's ahead of players like Ben, Sagan, Backstrom, Crosby, Kuznetsov, Malkin, Pavelski, Goudreau. Not a bad group to be compared to Ovechkin also. And Dave, it's remarkable to see the plays that he makes and the plays that that he sees before everybody else. Before we can even see in the press box from far above, and he's on the ice. And it's going to be amazing to see what he does, as teams start to key on him, but also, Dave, you look at, I said it in my story, that perhaps the most impressive play he's made since he's been back was the one that wasn't a goal, where he went between his legs and just missed the net there in Montreal. Like this, it's like, you look at the points, you look at the goals, you look at the plays, and then you say, well, this guy is doing something that you have to take notice of on a nightly basis. And how many 19-year-olds can you say that about?
Yeah, and the scary thing is he's going to get so much better. And I know that sounds almost insane because it is. His game will round out. He'll start to know the league. He'll start to know how to navigate players. You got to think he hasn't even faced defenders. Yeah, he hasn't even faced every team once. He's going to goaltenders. Like his game from a mental standpoint will get better. Physically, he'll get a little bigger. Who knows? He might even get a little faster, to be honest. There's still so much more to come from him, and you just hope he's been injured twice in his career, once in juniors, once now in the NHL. You have to hope that that doesn't become a thing, because it would be such a shame. But I don't even want to talk about that, because I just want to revel in the greatness that is Connor McDavid already. I mean, it's so great to see him. And then you also look at Aaron Ekblad possibly as those two guys being like the face of the league for years to come. And the league is in a good place if that's the case, because put it this way, Connor McDavid, considering that Edmonton is a team all the way up there in Canada, you're going to have people coming to see Connor McDavid now. They're
in their new building.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll go up there for a game. I'll go up there to watch him at home and to see how those fans adore him and everything like that. It's just so great for the league. And the biggest thing that I take away from his game is that, you look at a guy like Gaudreau, who's really fast as well, or even a Patrick Kane, but there's so much fluidity to Connor McDavid, where he makes these plays. Like you're talking about where he stole the puck from Andy Green. And it was like it happened so quickly and so without much like fanfare. It just happened. And you think, like, how does he do that? And it's amazing that at his age, there's no wasted movement. He's not out of control when he does some of the things that he does. What you see from someone like Gaudreau a little bit. It's unbelievable to watch him every single night. He's worth throwing on. If you have the NHL package, you might as well just...
If you can watch the game.
You might as well have Edmonton on every night.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially since they're not very good. And, it's remarkable, too, because you look at the collection of talent they have up there where Jordan Eberle had his first career hat trick Thursday night. And who was his centerman? It was Connor McDavid. That they've been just waiting for this success. And they've been waiting for this success and this excitement, and with all the number one picks and all that stuff. It's almost like there's this budding. I mean, it's hard to say this because they're still very bad. They're still almost in the number one pick spot, or in the position to be in position for that, where this is almost like going to be a budding dynasty of players and skill, with McDavid leading it, almost to the point where it was the old Oilers, where they were all those guys that were along with Gretzky, like, they were like the Beatles on a nightly basis, where every city they'd go to, there was a huge buzz surrounding them. And you're going to get that in the coming days here with Edmonton, with McDavid at the forefront of it, where there's still Taylor Hall, where there's still Jordan Eberle, where there's Yakupov, and there could be, assuming they don't, maybe they trade one of those guys, whether it's Yakupov or Nugent Hopkins, and it's going to be like the 80s and the Oilers all over again here, where, the McDavid kid does something spectacular every night and applies all this skill and superstardom around him, where they're just going to be like, the must. And again, it's unfortunate in some cases because, you did mention Edmonton being so far away, and the NHL is such an American entity at this point, with so many teams, with 23 out of 30 teams there. But you just have to hope they don't win the lottery again.
Yeah, just because I almost feel like that puts more pressure on them if they win the lottery. Yeah. I think they need to just kind of go out there. Also, I think they need to take a defenseman, or trade down and get a defenseman and maybe get some assets, because defense is a thing. There's two names that I think that would make sense with Edmonton. And again, I'm just obviously speculating.
Well, Travis Hamonic, obviously.
Well, yeah, Travis Hamonic to an extent, but I think that there's two players who we've heard about maybe that they could possibly be moved. One of them is Shea Weber, though obviously his skill set is not quite the run and gun style, but the thing is, if he's following the play with his big gun, it could be devastating. The other one is I mean, he helped them so much defensively.
Yeah.
The other one is Kevin Shattenkirk, because you look at the way that he's put up points, that I think that if you put him in a system that has the guys that can fly like that, he could be a 60-point-a-year guy, to be honest, if he's on his game. I think that they need to make a move to get a legitimate defenseman, even if it means trading Taylor Hall, who I think to an extent now kind of becomes expendable, because maybe you'll get more for him than you will Nugent Hopkins. Maybe not. Yeah. Maybe Nugent Hopkins is the guy, but I think they need to make a move to get a big-time defenseman. Sure, they could use goaltending too, but you're not just going to find that easily. And you know what? I think Talbot actually has been okay at times this year. They're not helping him out much defensively. They need to make a move to get better on the blue line, because if not, it's going to be nothing but run and gun hockey with nothing much coming out of the back end.
I would say maybe we should root for that, because that'd be pretty exhilarating. But no, I agree with you that there's, and that's why I saw Nugent Hopkins. But to have a 1-2 punch of McDavid and Nugent Hopkins doesn't hurt either. Where I like Hall, and I think the thing with Hall is, and maybe is that he's a mentor to McDavid right now. They live together. They're playing cards. They're playing games. They're bonding on a nightly basis. I don't know that you want to strip that of him already. I mean, at the same point, you mentioned Aaron Ekblad. Aaron Ekblad moved out of the Mitchell's house this past offseason. He's learning how to cook. He's learning how to figure out life on his own here a little bit, which is obviously the hardest part. And I'm still going to have to see Aaron Ekblad's birth certificate to believe that he's 19 or 20 years old, because talking to him, watching him play, I don't necessarily believe it.
No, I don't.
But
are we sure? I mean, he is in Sunrise. He's pretty close to Cuba, where they love to make people's ages not what they are. So who knows?
Yeah, no, that's the. But I digress. No, it's hard because there's always going to be value in a 23-year-old center. Especially a former number 1 overall pick. And if if he becomes expendable, you make McDavid your number 1 center. Maybe you have or whatever you have behind it.
Draisaitl can play. I mean, he can play center.
Yeah, that's the thing. So you almost make Nugent Hopkins expendable. He's still going to command. He's young enough to still have value, even though his years they've been very disappointing up there. But here, my thing is, it's exciting to see one of the great organizations again. They've been down for so long. I mean, they haven't even made the playoffs. This is 10 years in a row going to be, and since that run to the Cup final in 2006, and they've only won 5 playoff series since '92, Dave. So I mean, it's been a long time for Edmonton, and they are, say what you want, they're far away, it's cold, it's dark, it's frigid, nobody knows where Edmonton is. They're one of the great organizations in this sport's illustrious history, with Gretzky and with Messier and some of the guys they can claim as their own, and now they have another one. It's good to see them kind of building back to prominence, more than just, oh, hey, they're in it for the number 1 pick again,
Yeah, it would be nice to get rid of that mantra of, oh, here they're gonna tank again, and they're gonna get the number 1 pick. I think brighter days are certainly on the way there.
Yeah,
but
it's disappointing though, because Rexall is such a building of history and excitement, and it was the place where all those guys I just mentioned played and won cups, and that this is the last year, and that the injuries kind of put such a damper on that send-off year to Rexall. It's a little disappointing, but you said brighter days are ahead for Edmonton.
Yeah, I think every time an Edmonton Oilers fan sees Connor McDavid do something, I think it'll hurt a little less to lose that building, that's for sure. But there's another team out there now that is having their struggles as well. They're playing in an outdoor game in a couple weeks. The Minnesota Wild, who certainly, if you listen to this show enough, I've kind of always enjoyed them. But I certainly am not enjoying seeing what they're doing right now.
Oh.
The Wild are toiling. They're still within striking distance of the wild card here, just because Colorado has kind of picked it up, but they were so far behind that they haven't had a chance to pull away. And Nashville actually has had their share of struggles as well. But for Minnesota, this is a team, I know Mike Yeo kind of has survived a couple times when he might have been like a day away from being fired. I think
Last year, especially.
I think he'll probably stay through this year unless it gets really bad. Just because at this point, you're really going to make a trade that late in this. A coaching change that late in the season. Minnesota's in trouble though. I mean, Dubnyk is not nearly what he was last year, though he's been okay. Scoring, they've struggled a hell of a lot to put the puck in the net. Pat, I don't think this team's a playoff team.
No, and I said a couple weeks back that it felt like I still think Colorado's going to get in it because the star power and Varlamov's going to be Pickard kind of carried them along in the goaltending department until Varley got that whole thing settled with the domestic violence case, and now it seems like he's back and he's going to right their goaltending ship. And you look at Minnesota. I mean, Dave, this is. You mentioned Mike Yeo. He's grabbing at straws here to just try and find. He's just trying to. He sat Jason Zucker and Thomas Vanek the other night as healthy scratches. Dave, Thomas Vanek. I mean, I mentioned him a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the Wild. Like, where's he been? This is like one of their cogs, one of their main pieces. And you're going to sit him out for a game. I mean, we're in a playoff race where every game is vital at this point. I agree with you in that sense that, and it's unfortunate because, we talked about him last year, and Yo was, he kicked his team off the ice, and he was such in peril of getting fired, and then they made the trade for Dubnyk, and Dubnyk kind of carried them along, and it was almost like when you think about like making a trade mid-season to kind of wake your team up as opposed to firing the coach. You see baseball teams do that. They make a trade mid-season and to shake things up, the organization up, and it kind of woke them up. Obviously, ran to the second round of the playoffs, but Dave, you've alluded to it a lot, that this is a team that has aspirations. And this is a team that it's not just making the playoffs isn't good enough for them anymore. They've spent a lot of money on a lot of, big name players, Vanek being one of them, Parise being one of them, Jason Pominville being another. And Dave, this is win now time. These guys are in their 30s. Ryan Suter's in his 30s. And they have a young core. They have guys like Coyle and guys like Gronlund, and Niederreiter and Zucker I mentioned, but Dave, this isn't happy to be their time anymore for the Wild, and they if they regret, I mean they gave up a hat trick to Alexander Ovechkin Thursday night, which teams have done worse than other better teams have done worse against them, but they're 1-7-2 in their last 10, and this is usually the time where good teams start making a little separation with them. I mean, you look at what Florida's doing, and they're 6 points up now. They're pulling away a little bit to get into that playoff spot. And you look at the Rangers are playing better, and you look at the Islanders are starting to play better, and they're making their push to the playoffs. And these are teams that have playoff pedigree, and St. Louis is cruising right along, and Dallas is cruising right along, and Minnesota's got that same playoff pedigree. And you look at, they're about to take the league's stage, basically. Finally they're going to host an outdoor game. They've been complaining about it up there for years now. It's the state of hockey, and this team is just, it's like they've run out of gas here, and I don't know what. There aren't a lot of fixes because there's skill. The roster is built with skill. And they just don't score enough. They have the third fewest goals in the Western Conference, and they're going to get caught by Anaheim, who's suddenly playing a lot better here, a lot more offensively driven. And you just wonder whether this is a team that's going to rise or just tank back to into the Matthews sweepstakes stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to say. The one thing that I think makes you feel confident about them is they almost practically couldn't be worse. They're 1-7-2 in their last 10. Yeah. I mean, literally, it doesn't get much worse than that, other than going 0-10, and they're still right there. they're still right there. I mean, they have a couple games at hand.
2 points out.
Yeah, and they're 2 points out. Where if they can even be decent the rest of the way, they're going to stick with it. Because I don't think, even if Colorado makes it, I don't think they're going on a run here where they're going to win, 15 of 20 games. Same thing as Nashville. Nashville has shown that they're kind of middle of the road. I think they could get hot more than anyone, just because.
And Minnesota, we agree, is the most talented team that's in this fight here for the wild cards. I mean, we think Minnesota is better than Colorado in terms of structure, in terms of skill, in terms of all of this stuff. With the back end, I'm just dumbfounded by their inability to score goals.
Yeah.
And it's baffling to me because, they have, guys like, we mentioned Pominville. We know what Vanek's capable of, and we know what Parise can will them to goals, and with his tenacity, with his with his skill and tenacity, and that relentless pressure he puts on defenses, but whether it's below the goal line or whether it's in through the neutral zone, he's just great. And usually, I mean, that's what he did when he was in New Jersey all those years. He kind of wheeled them to the playoffs a bunch of times, even though they were less talented squad. And he did that. He's done that here or Minnesota too, where they've been, and yet you're just waiting for it to actually happen. And Vanek's not having a great year. And where's their secondary scoring coming from? Niederreiter only has 9 goals, and Pominville only has 6 goals. And you just, it's a little surprising to me that Ryan Suter is second on the team in points.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned the Devils with Parise, because I kind of look at these two teams as teams that are kind of similar standings right now, doing things different ways, and not to say that either is going to make the playoffs, because they both might not. I'd rather be the Devils right now than be Minnesota if you wanted to compare teams where you look at Minnesota and on paper they have a lot of talent. Pominville, Vanek, and all these other guys who should be really good players, and it's not happening. Whereas the Devils don't really have a lot of talent, and a guy by the name of Lee Stepniak has the most points on the team. And in a sense, sometimes it's better to be winning as a system without having the standouts, as opposed to having these big guns, these players who are good, and struggling like they are now. That to me speaks to either no cohesiveness, maybe the system isn't working, maybe the guys just don't play well together. And I think that's the scary thing about them, is that it doesn't make sense as to why they are where they are. I mean, this team certainly has talent, and it's just not coming together. I don't want to blame the coaching, because I think that's the easy way out, but something clearly is not clicking with Minnesota.
And also when you factor that, they threw all that money at Suter and Parise, and this is like their window here with those two guys, because Parise plays such a tough physical game and is such a smallish kind of guy. He's not a big body, and he plays that that basically circle the net, make plays below the goal line, make plays in front of the net, pounce on rebounds. He's going to wear out here and in his advancing age. And you just wonder how much of that window he's going to have, when he's going to be 32 next year. And gun to my head, I have to say, I think they're going to figure it out here. And maybe this outdoor game. But you look at where Vancouver was when they hosted their quote unquote outdoor game a couple of years ago, and it was, there was an embarrassment. And then look at what they've done since. In terms of rebuilding. It feels like Minnesota's in one of those. And here's the real problem with Minnesota, Dave. If they happen to get in, they're not going anywhere, probably.
No, I just can't see them beating any of those teams. If they face LA, no way. If they face, maybe they could catch Dallas. For a game or two, they could stun them, but Dallas has been a lot better lately. I might have to change my tune on Dallas a little bit, though that remains to be seen. Good luck against Chicago. We all know how that went last year. I think
the last 3 years, really.
Here's my question about Minnesota, though. Is there a point if they really continue to struggle here, that they become sellers as opposed to buyers.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you could get somebody to take one of those deals off your hands, whether it's Pominville, Pominville is the oldest of
Yeah.
the forwards, and he's still got 3 more years after this.
I would be terribly afraid of Vanek. I wouldn't touch Vanek if I was anyone.
No.
That's just me.
No, I wouldn't. But I mean, it's almost like you said, like what the Leafs, not quite the same as what the Leafs did, but you look at what the Leafs did in terms of finding teams to take the deals. You know, if you find a willing partner and you're going to get a package for one of these guys, whether it's Vanek, whether it's Pominville, whether it's, I mean, even Parise, just because of term, you have to consider it, right?
I think so. It brings us back to Montreal, and I think that you don't want to paint yourself into a corner as an organization, and I think that if they kind of for the Wild, it's almost different. Where Montreal, I think if they stay the course, they can chalk it up to a lost season. Minnesota, I think they have to show that something is changing, whether it's addition by subtraction, and they say, look, this wasn't working. We need to free up cap space for the future, so we're going to trade someone and move forward. You know, get a big package for a guy. Look, I don't think they'd trade Suter, but I think Parise. Although I don't know, does he have a full no trade? I don't even remember. He might.
I think he does actually.
So obviously that would be a little bit
no movement.
I don't think he wants to leave.
No,
but maybe they
signed there for a reason.
Yeah, of course, because he wants to stay there. But
all those guys have no movement clauses. Parise, Koivu, Vanek, Pominville, all 4 of them have no move clauses.
Yeah, I would think someone like Pominville, you could probably get to do that though if you needed to. But.
I would think so. Also, like it just seems like they're almost like the Islanders at this point where they've hit their stride and they've hit their where they are. Yeah. They might be the 3rd or 4th best team in the conference, and how long can you be that? And this year they're not even that, obviously, and the way they're playing, they're not playing like that. But you almost sometimes have to say, you have to tear it. No matter, they're never going to get. Are they ever going to get to that level where they are hands down the best? You look at Dallas. Dallas has passed them at this point. Chicago obviously is ahead. St. Louis, maybe. I don't know. They're probably on par with that. LA is past them. Are they ever going to come out of the Western Conference?
I don't think so. And I think that's very evident right now. Maybe they can make the playoffs, but that's not what the goal of this was. That's not why they spent all this money. I think they need to look at different avenues at this point because clearly even if they were a playoff team right now, even if they were the wild card seed, even if they had 61 points right now, would you really feel good about that's the return you're getting if you're a Wild fan or something like that?
Another second round exit.
If that, I think they need, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm certainly not going to prognosticate what they're going to do here, but I think there needs to be changes, and I don't think it's just as easy as saying let's put a new coach in. I don't think that's going to be the fix either.
Yeah, I tend to. Dave, every game's essential. This weekend is a big weekend for couples, of course, being Valentine's Day. Is there anything that you are looking forward to on the hockey slate between now and when we record again?
Actually, Monday is an interesting game. We have Pittsburgh at Florida, and I think that's a really interesting game because Florida.
We just saw that game a couple weeks ago, and Pittsburgh came from 2-0 down with 5 minutes left to win.
That's what I was about to get into. Florida blew that lead. Sorry. Yeah, Florida blew that lead, and I think that that's a benchmark game for them because Pittsburgh is playing really well. Certainly, I like to look at Florida because they're so young. As when they get exposed, how do they respond? Because everything is kind of uncharted territory. Not including Jaromir Jagr in that, of course, because he's seen everything possible. But I think for the core of this team, it's all uncharted territory. So for me, it's in Florida. I want to see what they can do, knowing that they had a game that was challenging for them. What can they do this time? I just think it's a cool benchmark game for them.
I'm going to look forward to a couple potential Cup Finals previews, perhaps. Washington is in Dallas Saturday night. Dallas. We talked about. Jim Neal won the offseason, and Dallas is going to the playoffs again. It's just a matter of if they can figure out how to get past. I mean, it's basically the same for both teams. Is Dallas going to get to can Washington, sailing right along, overcome the critics and get there? And then Washington on Tuesday will host the Kings. And the Kings are, off of that 9-2 win, had a bad loss in Brooklyn. Jonathan Quick might be a little banged up. We'll see if there's anything in terms of an injury for them or something serious. But, LA and Washington would be a pretty fun series. And we might get a little preview of that come Tuesday. A lot of great games, though, in there. Dallas is in St. Louis. Anaheim's in Chicago. One about benchmark games. So it'll be fun.
So you mean you're not using next Friday's San Jose at Carolina game as a potential cup final? No.
You know what? Stranger things have happened, man. And funny fact, Carolina is going to celebrate the 10th anniversary of its Stanley Cup this weekend. So maybe some of the fans will actually decide to show up for that game.
I sure hope so, because that's another point. But I think that just about does it for us today, Pat. Any last words before we get out of here?
I think we said too much.
All right. So for Pat Pickens, I'm Dave Turner. This is Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. We will be back next week. We'll have some outdoor games to talk about. Plenty of stuff going around the league. It's a fun time to be a hockey fan. Take care.